Bonjour à tous et bienvenue chez LuxGears. Alors aujourd'hui je vous propose un test comparatif entre deux voitures que vous allez aimer, je pense bien. C'est un comparatif, regardez derrière moi, il y a quoi? Il y a une 911, c'est la 3 litres 2 de Kim et c'est ma 997. Donc moi ce que je vous propose, c'est qu'on parte au volant Kim qui va lui tester ma 997 et moi je vais tester sa 3.2 et on va vous donner nos impressions. Alors chose importante, à partir de maintenant, la vidéo, elle va être en anglais parce que Kim est plus à l'aise en anglais. C'est parti! Donc, nous voilà à bord de la 3.2 et je vais switcher en anglais pour discuter avec Kim. So Kim, while I'm preparing, maybe you can tell us quickly the story of this
car.
911. Yes.
So
How did you get it?
So basically, I always wanted a 911. When I was a kid with my Carrera track, as a 10-year-old, I already had a 911, of course, and then. Back in 1999, I started looking, and in fact there were two for sale, one a coupe and a Targa, and both from first owners. And in the end, I bought this with 48,000 kilometers at the time.
48,000.
48,000 in '99. I paid 20,000 euro for it, and
20,000.
20,000, good old times.
20 000 euros. Okay.
And so. It was a really and it's did very well. I since then have had very little. I had to of course change a few parts that wear, but nothing big.
Good.
So,
but you told me that you didn't keep the car all the time because you sold it and you got it back.
Exactly, because then back in 2012, 11 must have been. I bought a 993 Targa, and there was a friend of mine. He always wanted to buy this, so. I decided I don't need two, so I sold it to him with the promise that he sells it back to me when he ever sells it.
Okay, good.
And so I had a call 4 or 5 years later, so this is back in 2017. He called me and said, look, now is the moment, because he bought a 993 Cabriolet. So now is the moment, do you want your car back? So I bought it back again.
And now you have it again.
That's it.
And now you keep it.
I keep it now.
And while you were talking, I was experiencing the gearbox, and it reminded me my first time in a 911. It was in the 90s, and it was a 964. And I did a mistake between first and reverse.
Yeah.
That's typical when you're not used to it. But
yes, exactly.
Yeah, but what I'm surprised about this car is how well everything fits together, because you don't feel anything shaky. The car is really, it feels like new.
Yeah, it's very, but these cars, I really must say I love this. It's of course noisy, much noisier than the 993 and less comfortable maybe, but it's so well built and very robust car.
And I tell you what, something I really like from the start is how smooth the engine is. Yeah. It's really smooth, and it really feels like this car has a big engine for its size.
Yeah.
And then the precision of the gearbox is wow. G50 or not?
G50, yeah.
It is the G50.
This is an 89 model, so it's the very last.
Important to mention.
Very last model, and they came with I think 86 with a G50.
So yeah, non-assisted steering. Steering. So you feel everything. You know, you have to put the weight on it. You have to put the arm power.
Yes.
But
you also know what's going on all the time.
Yeah. I'm just looking for So I put the fifth gear instead of the third. Yeah. So now I'm learning it, because my 997, you will see, it's so easy.
Yes.
But the fact that this car is a bit complicated, well, just a bit, makes it interesting to drive, because there is a connection.
Yes. You really need to drive it actively.
Yeah. Again, smoothness and torque. The engine torque is there. Wow, it's really nice.
Although I find torque, if you really want to go, you have to rev it above 4,000.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
It's smooth. It rolls along.
Yeah.
But It's there. The 993 is much faster.
Okay, but really something I really love is right away is the gearbox. The way,
Yeah.
like if you do the double declutching and then you do the little blip, it's the gear goes in fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's
smooth. You were saying that actually the 993 has got more torque and the engine goes better, right?
the engine goes much better.
Of course,
It's,
here we are at
yeah,
231 horsepower,
exactly.
and in the 993 you have
It's 285.
285.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And there was I did 272, and then they brought the VarioCam in '96.
you have the VarioCam.
I have the
Okay.
VarioCam. Yeah. It's a Targa. All the Targas have VarioCam already.
Okay, I didn't know. Something I learned today. And then so this car is from '89, so one of the latest,
Exactly.
and 130 some kilometers, so it's still
Yeah.
very well. You feel that everything is well put together. There's no shaky thing. Suspension has been changed recently, you said.
New suspension, new clutch, gearbox was open and closed again, and a few other things I don't remember now. But in fact, yeah, also all the starter engine, etc. These things had to be changed over time. But that's it. Otherwise, it's really
And what do you like on this one versus your 993?
well. This I once read an article about the G model, so this one, the 3.2, and they said it's like if you take your dog out in the October and it's raining and you take it across a field and you run with your dog across the field. So this is really, you go out and you really feel the small roads and you engage.
You
and
feel
go,
everything.
You feel everything and you go, you push it hard and you know by now how to push it, so that you don't never lift off and all these golden rules, and then it will basically be very reliable and you know exactly what it's doing. The 993 is more supple, more elegant, faster, but it's more to me a GT, and this one is really for the small roads. So.
Well, now we are heading towards small roads to
Right.
feel a little bit the chassis, the brakes, everything. Like you were saying, basically, yeah, you feel everything. Like,
But it's so important in this. I've once or twice experienced what you should never do. Never lift off. Right?
Yeah.
Slow in, fast out. So in the curve, you keep it. At least you don't need to accelerate. Once in a curve, I changed gear from second to third, and because just at the short lift off,
it moves.
It moves behind, and
you should not unsettle the balance of the car.
balance of the car.
Nice. No, but we really feel this car is well put together because the suspension is working perfectly.
It's working very well. Exactly.
And the brakes, you have such a nice feel. You have almost the impression there is no brake assistance because it's so, you touch it and it's hard right away. There is no dead stroke. And then, of course, something I forgot to mention are the pedals. You have the inverted pedals like the clutch and the brakes, they go down into the floor, and that takes some time to be used to because like the heel in toe, it's a challenge. You have to have very twisted feet to be able to do it. But no, otherwise, well, of course, as well, another thing that to me it's a bit of an issue is the sitting position, which is not ideal because, as we were talking, I have short arms, and to have my legs fine, since you cannot set up the steering wheel, so you are a bit far, so you drive a little bit. I need to lean a little bit forwards to turn, but I mean, these are the cars from the 70s,
and they didn't change it hardly, in all those years.
No, it's only with the 996 that they changed it, and this in a previous video that I made, I said that this was one of my criteria. No, see, again.
There we are.
Reverse. It was one of my criteria for the 997 was the sitting position because now with with the new Porsches 911s you're well seated. I mean, perfect sitting position.
Yes.
And as well the ergonomics, because it's true that here you have to look for where are the lights, where is the sunroof if you have a sunroof.
Yes. And you have these little buttons up here to turn.
What we need to realize is that the ergonomics of this car dates from the 60s, like 64.
That's it.
So
I have spun it on the Nürburgring a few times.
Yes, a few times.
Yes.
So you drove on the Nordschleife with it?
Yeah, both Nordschleife and
GP-Strecke.
And the GP-Strecke. But it was in GP-Strecke that I really spun it. But I was provoking it, let's face it. Yeah.
So, but sometimes it's good to be able to do that so that you learn how the car behaves. And there are some small tracks that you can go to do drifting and learn.
Yes.
And I think I would recommend that to many people that want to know the limits of their car, to do that in a safe place.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think I'm going to conclude so that the video is not too long, but it's really, really nice to have been able to try this car, because as you know, I've tested the car, a similar one recently on a track, but honestly I feel that this one is more precise, and as well I was a track and I was not going fast and it was not real driving conditions, but in this case it is real driving conditions, and I'm quite positively surprised by the quality of the ride and the precision you get. It's really, really nice. The engine is smooth. That's if there is something I need to take away from this drive, is smoothness of the engine and precision of steering and gearbox, because really, really that's really amazing.
The engine, in fact, I always find it, indeed, it is reasonably fast car, but it's especially also just smooth.
It is really smooth.
And you can go low revs.
Yeah. These engines you'll see in the 997 is the same. They accept quite well to drive below 2000.
Yeah.
Because they are naturally well balanced.
Yes.
And they have the torque.
Yes. Exactly.
No, it's like butter.
Yes.
The engine and gearbox, they work well together. But I hope that you guys got the message. I really like this car, and it's like back to the roots, really.
Yeah.
So
That's it.
So
analog.
let's analog, of course, analog. But let's switch now to the 997 with Kim on the wheel, so he gives his feedback on my newer 911.
Looking forward.
Okay, Kim. So now you are in the 997, and you said that's something you like already.
Something I like already is that I can actually adjust the seating position.
I told you that is my main criterion on this car. That's why I wanted a 997 or 6, but I took the 7 because I like it better from a styling point of view. But modern 911s have this advantage of having a good sitting position.
Exactly, and even in the 993, which is after all they built until 98, 99, you have to take what you get.
Yeah, because it's still based on the old body.
Yeah. Oh, all right.
Let's start.
Let's start it up. Great. This is modern.
I'm curious to have your feedback on that.
Then this got this already. Now I can tell this turbine feeling of the engine, which I also remember from the Boxster.
But you don't have that on yours, the turbine? Yes? No?
No, I mean this is so smooth compared to mine. This one I don't have to work the clutch very much.
Okay.
I have to work it, and then it's even smoother, this one.
What do you think about the gearbox?
The gearbox is nice. It's short. Much shorter than mine.
But do you think it's as mechanical as yours?
No, it's
a bit notchy, huh?
Yeah, it's absolutely.
That's what I miss on this one.
Yeah.
Because I love so much the G50. It's very mechanical, very precise.
Yes. This is also precise, but you don't have the same feeling that you're actually moving some gears, some sprockets into each other. Yeah, that's true. And then, of course, it's very easy to drive. It's very you just roll along. You don't actually have to think so much.
Yeah.
The 3.2, you have to think all the time.
Exactly. Am I in the right gear?
Exactly.
Oh, a squirrel. Oh, fun. And something to notice is the fact that here we have the PASM, so the active suspension, and now we are in normal mode.
Right.
And the other interesting thing is that on this car I have the chrono pack option, which with the sport button activates both the suspension and the engine mapping. And then you will feel that when you go further and then we switch to sport, there are two things that change: suspension and throttle response. You tell me what you think.
In fact, I tried, a friend of mine has a 997 Cabriolet,
Yeah.
and with standard suspension, and there the ride is much firmer.
Then this
harder
one?
Than this one, yes. It's interesting.
Yeah, I really like this car
Yes.
in normal mode because I think it's very compliant,
Yeah.
comfortable. It's a car that you can drive in the city, take your girlfriend with.
Yeah.
She'll not be,
Complaining too much.
complaining that the car is hard or it's noisy. It's decently comfortable. So it's a car you can do many things with.
Yes.
Of course, if you want to do track days, that's not ideal because then
No.
you'll want a more a stiffer suspension, a more sporty feeling car. But
No, but in fact, the 3.2, let's face it, is noisy. This year, I can imagine, is much less noisy once you start traveling.
yeah.
Nice.
Torque.
Very nice. Yes.
And as you said on the Carrera 3.2, the engine as well delivers the full torque from
Yeah.
4.5.
4,000. And here's the same, isn't it?
Yeah, it has the same characteristics.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
like just a bigger engine.
Yes. Wow. And then it's very planted.
Yeah,
Really, it feels.
can go straight.
However, the steering, clearly is not a mechanical steering, and you can feel that it's not as.
It is-
it's not talking so much to me.
It is not talking as much on yours, but still it is a hydraulic assistant.
Okay,
It's
I
not
see.
yet electric. So
Right.
imagine how the electric steerings are now. So you lose a lot. But in yours, what is nice with yours is the fact that it's non-assisted.
Yeah.
And that's you have full
Yes.
feeling of it.
Yes. Now, of course, the exhaust is lovely, and so you will sometimes drive fast just to hear the exhaust.
Yeah.
And
And
then-
this exhaust is the normal one. It's not the sport exhaust, unfortunately. But well, there's still some modifications you can do.
Then I have the same feeling as with mine when you're driving a little bit faster and you have the
front
bumps.
end?
The front end is looking for the grip and is
Yeah.
actually telling you
Yeah.
that there's still some way to go or not. So
Yeah.
you got that response. You know?
That's a very good point that you make here, because actually the 997 is the last of the modern 911s to still have that. Because if you drive a 991, or here, your left, if you go on a 991 or worse, a 992, it's completely gone. I mean, the car is better, of course, it's more efficient, but
Yeah.
you lost this 911-ish characteristic. And
Yes.
that's a bit of a pity.
Yes.
Okay,
And this
now
is,
I propose that we go on sport, so you
Yes,
feel different.
let's try
So I
that,
just
yeah.
press the sport button,
Okay.
and now two things change: suspension and throttle. So just feel.
Interesting is when I actually really put my foot down below 4,000, it's not as, it doesn't really hit, and
No.
accelerate as quick as I had expected, I must say. But once it goes above 4, then it's
more
got
aggressive.
this beautiful turbine sound.
And do you feel the suspension?
And the suspension now is really firmed up, and you feel the individual small bumps. Yes.
I love the fact that
It's,
we are able to feel this
Yeah.
connection to the
Exactly.
chassis.
Exactly. And then it still has the typical 911 characteristic that you go in, like I do with mine, and then you push it out.
Yes.
And you actually can feel how the back end just plants down, and you can actually trust that it will not go away. It won't skip out.
Yeah.
It will actually just accelerate out, and you can trust it. So it's actually the big fun of 911 driving to me is go in and then feel how it's actually the front end that maybe skips a bit.
Exactly.
The back end just stays planted, and you can just thrive on it.
Yeah, the whole thing with these old 911s is the fact of entering the turn, on the brakes so that you make the weight transfer. But once you are in and you put the throttle on, it stays.
Exactly.
It's really.
And you really throw it out. Or
Yeah.
in the curve, you really throw it out of the curve.
Yeah.
It's really,
So see the bumps now? It's
Yeah.
more boom boom boom.
Exactly. This
But I
is-
like it.
yeah. But that's in fact how I remember my friend's car. This.
But if you don't want this, actually you can
No,
actually.
it's good. It's good.
Because you can turn the suspension off and keep the throttle.
Ah.
So you have the two things.
Oh, I think it's good. It's good
Okay.
for what we're doing today.
Yeah.
What a nice car. What a nice car.
And then, as soon as you hit the village, you go normal mode,
Yes.
and you have a comfortable car.
Yes. And this, of course, is really valuable because you can essentially change whenever you
Yeah.
see a nice road ahead of you. You just put it on, and then a few moments later, you're back to normal.
So, would you be, agreeing with me that this car, compared to yours, is easier?
It's
We are a bit less connected,
yeah.
but it's much more easier and
Much.
faster, easier to go fast.
Much easier to go fast, also than my 993. Although it's got the same kind of feel as a 993, that it is
Really?
a relatively easy car to drive because,
go right.
for example, also the engine is very responsive and it basically allows you to do what I'm doing just now, which is
Yeah.
taking off in second gear.
Yeah.
In the 3.2, as I said before, I need to play the clutch more if I do that, and the 3.2 is simply a much more tiring car.
Yeah, it's more demanding. It's a car, as you say. You need to be thinking all the time. What am I doing?
Yes.
Am I doing it right? Gearbox needs to look for the right gear.
Yes, and it doesn't basically let you get away with so many mistakes. Here you can probably do more mistakes. But
Next left.
I really find this lovely engine, and the S gives it that much more urgency and push than
the normal one.
The normal one. So it's wow, what a car!
Just push it to 7.
Wow. Yes.
Nice, huh?
And it just goes. It doesn't slow down. Above 6, sometimes cars they get a little bit.
Yeah. No, it goes up to 7 and well.
Yes.
I decided, well, I want a 2-wheel drive and I want a manual.
Mhm.
And that's why I got this car. I was really looking for, the purest 997 I could get.
Yes.
Of course, you can get a GT3, but that's outside my reach. But yeah.
Yes. No, but this is maybe it's a more drivable, fun than GT3, and it certainly has a lot of performance, plenty of performance. You don't need
Actually,
performance.
it's interesting because for a long time I was like, oh, I want a GT3, I want a GT3, and then finally a few months ago there was this advertising of a GT3 being sold, mint, 40,000 kilometers, decent price. So I went to try the car, and it was nice because I could go out with the guy and push it. And I went with my car so that I could make an A to B comparison.
Yes, exactly.
The GT3 on the track is fantastic, but on the road, actually it's not as nice as this car because it has less torque. The engine is fantastic, but it's fantastic from 6 up.
Yes.
This one has got already a lot of torque, even below 4. It's more drivable, and then it's more usable. I mean, it's comfortable, and
Exactly. Because
unless you do a lot of track, yeah, GT3 fantastic. But if you want to use your car on a everyday basis or go out on the weekend, have fun, and do some trips with your girlfriend, this is better than a GT3.
And let's face it, there's something else about these sports cars. These are very fast cars already. If you have a car that's even faster, you start actually not being able to exploit it. And it's fun to rev engine. But if this one you can still rev and you will still be not losing your license. And not so easily.
Well, you can still lose your license.
You can, but
I get it, yes.
But it's the GT3, I would indeed, as you say, if you're not on track, but otherwise, yeah.
And then the thing is as well, modern GT3s or modern GT4s that I drove as well, on road, they are a bit frustrating because I mean these cars they drive by themselves. They don't need you, you know. At least with our, you know, at the speeds we are driving on the road, because as you said, you cannot go right. You cannot go crazy speeds, but at normal speeds like we're doing now, I mean, there is very little input that the driver needs to give. So it's important that we are still able to enjoy and be aware that okay, the way we drive is important. We can go straight. So yeah,
That's it. Oh, but really very, very nice. And then, of course, 997, the dashboard, I find a big improvement. The dashboard of the 997 compared to the 996 is clearly, this is a very modern dashboard, and at the time it had all the functionalities that you would expect and more, like this phone, and all very well integrated, nice quality, good looks, it fits well. So I would argue this is definitely an advantage of the 997 over the 996.
Yeah, and that's why I guess the reason that the 997 is going up in value is because it is really what we can call now a modern classic, because the car is still modern enough to have, you know, good sitting position, as we said, good ergonomics, but still old enough to have this feeling of real 911 driving.
Absolutely. And look, just those little soft curves we were going through, it's so pleasant to drive, and it's so planted. Really, what a pleasure. It's really an easy classic, but it's a classic. And the way it's handled, like we were talking about before, maintains its classic feel, but it's supple and easy. So you can do anything with it. Really, really nice.
So can we conclude that this video is a good advertising for the 997?
It is, for sure. I mean, yes. I hope they stay still affordable so that more can join.
You can still find some decent ones in the 50s, 50,000. Yeah. I'm following quite closely the value of this car, because I don't know if I'm gonna keep it or not, and then checking the values, and it has been going up, but now it's starting to stabilize, and you find very nice ones around 60. Of course, you can find cheaper ones, but with more mileage. For instance, for information, my car's got 45,000, so it's
45.
It's almost new.
What's the story? How come? What happened to this car?
Well, the story of this car is particular. It's an American version. It was bought back, I think, in 2012 by a Belgian guy that went to US to make some business with cars. Unfortunately, apparently, it didn't do well his calculation, and when he brought the car back to Europe, he couldn't sell it. So he kept the car for 3 or 4 years in his garage, hoping to sell for the price he wanted. So he didn't get to sell it, and then finally he sold it to a friend for I don't know how much. And so the car basically didn't drive for a couple of years. And this friend drove the car for another couple of years, but once in a while. And then that guy, he liked sport cars, but he was more on the Corvette side, because he had a Stingray Corvette that he restored completely. And then he said, well, I'm not a 911 guy, and he wanted to sell the car. So basically, I got this car in 2017. So the car was 10 years old with 29,000 kilometers. So it looked a bit strange, of course, but I had it completely checked at that place that I mentioned to you. By the way, I can mention it's ATS Porsche in Nivelles, close to Brussels. Super good workshop. And my friend there, he checked the car and he said, go ahead, the car is fine, never had an accident, the PW test is good, the mileage matches the engine hours. And so that's how I got it. So now I have the car for 5 years, made almost 20,000 kilometers.
Yeah, well, that explains. And that's, of course, you have to find those two, and you have to be lucky. And I guess there are fewer and fewer of those around, because people like you, they go and find them.
So that's the story of this 911, and it's here on the right. And actually I'm pretty pleased with the car. If I sell it, it's just because I might need some money to make a real estate investment. But otherwise, I would keep it and just enjoy it, because the car is really in very good condition, and I can enjoy it on the weekend, take it out on nice twisty roads like we just did, or just take it and go on a small road trip.
Exactly. Nice.
So that's the story of my 911, and maybe I'll put it on sale. Keep in touch, you'll see if it's on sale or not. So bye for now.
Bye bye. Thanks.